Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. It's the show that's a day late because none of you thought to predict that market on Polymarket, the official not gambling sponsor of MLS. So some of us cleaned up on that one. We're back as always, Tim. That was clunkier than I wanted it to be, but I felt like it got the point across.
The funny thing is Polymarket's getting strays in this, even though they weren't at all involved in the thing that we're probably about to talk about for a minute, which is a little funny, except it definitely is highly relevant here because... Anyways, you want to just say the thing and we can say that we can just go from there?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, I wasn't even necessarily thinking that. I was more just, hey, Polymarket, right? Officially announced from MLS today, Yaya Boa and Derek Jones both handed lifetime suspensions for wagering on games, including games they participated in. There were some specific instances of both players gambling and potentially suggesting to others they should gamble on each of them to record a yellow card. They each recorded a yellow card. Ironic. It's not funny because it's terrible for the game and you never want to see it. I saw somebody share that Yaya Boa, dissolves his contract with LAFC or mutual termination, however you want to phrase it, and then immediately signs with a club in China who is currently facing a points deduction for match fixing. It just doesn't get better than that, Tim. Like, that's just a very MLS thing to happen.
It's like, hey, my people. I found my people.
I found my people.
I think like half the Chinese Super League, though, is facing points deductions for largely max fixing than some other stuff. Like, look up the standings. It's like half the teams are negative.
Yeah, I think they're on -7 points, and they're only 15th in the Chinese Super League. And I guess I don't know how many teams are in the Chinese Super League, but I should have. You know what?
I think that it's what is it, like 20? No, it is 16. It is just 16 teams.
Okay. Here we go.
But
there are 16 teams. 13 of them are on negative points at the moment.
Yep. After one game played each, only there's a few teams that are on positive points. Most of the teams that have won are on negative points. And who says that crime doesn't pay? So here we are. There's only God. 2 teams that have won and started off at 0 points, and so they are on top of the table with 3 points. If you have 0 points, you are midway through the table, and not on goal differential or anything. You just have more points than the majority of the league.
Exactly. Yeah. No. This is actually a first look at the 2026-27 EFL Championship when Spurs and Man City both end up going down. It's going to be a race to 0 to stay out of League One coming around next year. Now, look, there are people who are better equipped, I think, to report on this story than I am. At least I won't say the same for Tim. It's a stain on the game. It's exactly what we're concerned about. And when we sit here and spend 20 minutes complaining about Polymarket, this is the kind of thing we're complaining about, right?
So, and this is where the Polymarket stray, I think, fairly comes in. I will say, for starters, before sports gambling was legal and easy for everyone to do on their phones, it's not like there weren't examples in the past of players that gambled.
Of course.
And so, like, in a way, because like I honestly think that sports gambling getting legalized could potentially ruin sports in general because it just changes the way that people watch games, and people that do it say that it does, and they're like, no, it's great. Like, it makes me like pay attention to games I wouldn't care about. It's like, if you're not wanting to pay attention to a game, don't watch it. It's entertainment. Like, it's like, this isn't eating your vegetables. Like, you shouldn't need something to incentivize you to do it. This is supposed to be something you do in your spare time because you find it entertaining and fun. So that having said all that, right? It's not like, I mean, it's like most things in life, like making it illegal didn't stop it from happening. And now there's protections around it. And so like these guys, it didn't catch them before they did it, which is bad. It doesn't seem like those yellow cards really affected the games, which is, I mean, it is what it is, right? Like, they dodged a bullet there. It's not like, oh, if they had engaged in gambling, like, I'm going to get a red card, I'm going to let you score a goal, they would have caught it. It would have affected games and they'd be in the same place, right? And the league would look worse. So it shows the risk, but like, it shows the benefit of a regulated gambling industry versus Polymarket, where they don't have the same legal obligations to be finding all of these things. They don't have the same legal obligation to be reporting in the same way. There's probably contractual language. It's not as strong. I know a couple of people that have worked in different parts of the gambling industry, in the legal part of it. I'm not saying if some guy needs a knee broken, I know a guy. But they told me that the legal protections, there's a lot of cross industry stuff that's going on. So it's not like you can like do stuff on one platform and get caught and other platforms don't necessarily know about it. And a lot of it's heavily regulated. They've done a lot of work to convince regulators in states where they were skeptical that they're putting proper procedures in place. Polymarket has none of that, right? And the person that I spoke to was like, look, even if Polymarket really tried hard, I doubt that they would be able to come up with a system as comprehensive as it was, because they wouldn't have the same number of inputs that they've got that, in this industry. So that's bad. And yeah, this is just an example of, what happens when you start inviting these things in.
In the context of sports gambling at large, to your point there, once you open yourself up to it, once you become receptive to it, once you start profiting off of it, it now draws everything into question, right? Every questionable yellow card, every questionable Mauricio Pineda non-handball or whatever it was last year, right? Where we have a referee not calling a foul or a penalty in the way of the fire. That's where you start to wonder, maybe not you, but that's where, let's say, the lowest common denominator of fans starts to wonder, is this thing rigged? Right.
And it's like it's a loss of innocence thing, right? Like it's a this has happened. And look, like, again, this in this particular instance didn't affect the outcomes of games, which yay.
Well, and not that we know of, right?
No, not that. Well, I mean, I think that they probably did find all of the accounts that these people used and had access to. And it seems like they also know like the people where it's like, hey, buddy, like put money on this thing happening. Like it seemed like that was all. Now, I mean, again, like who knows, maybe it wasn't comprehensive, but like it seems like some of that has happened. But
yeah,
the fact that it's happened once, right? It could be happening again. It could be happening with a ref, right? Like it could be happening with a coach. Like, we just don't know. And I think that it's that loss of innocence factor that really kind of gets like to the point that you were making. Like it makes you question things of like, that's weird. I wonder if.
Yeah, you lose a certain amount of plausible deniability, right?
Right.
And maybe probably through no fault of your own, I would say, for most people. And again, I mean, the not surprising, but I think most concerning part is two players on the same team, right? So these are guys who can and did obviously conspire together. It wasn't two separate actors. So look, we've talked about this a lot. Like I said, I think there are people who are probably better equipped to report on the whole of it. So, I mean, I would just shout out our normal national friends, right? Of guys like Matt Doyle, like Ben Wright, like Joe Lowry, even like Pablo Mar, who I think spoke about a little bit today. Like, keep your eyes peeled there. We'll just leave it.
Yeah. And look, one thing just to say on that, Pablo Mar now writes for The Guardian. Alex Abnos, who's the editor for the soccer coverage or U.S. soccer coverage of The Guardian and has been in the industry for a very long time. And he's one of the best. So they did a good job hiring him. And he hired Pablo Mar and Jeff Reuter and a few other people ahead of the World Cup. And Abnos pointed out, The Guardian does not take ad money from sports betting companies. So, they have no incentive not to cover this. And in some ways, they actually kind of do have an incentive to cover it in a roundabout way, because they are not every publication refuses to take money from sports gambling companies. So,
yeah, exactly. All right.
There's 15 minutes completely not about anything.
It was not. It was about 9 minutes. About 9 minutes. And let's talk about the game that actually happened and that was played. The Chicago Fire on a 0-0 draw, going scoreless in Columbus against the Crew. Henrik Rudstrom's side coming out strong, but not quite strong enough. Well, nothing. It was a weird game where a lot happened, but nothing happened. And I still feel like there's plenty of things to talk about. Just to run back through our match facts here. Leo Barroso leaves early, 28th minute with an injury. No update as of yet. From what I could tell, Tim, it didn't look to be too debilitating. He walked off under his own power. He seemed fine on the bench after the game. I don't know if we got an update from Gregg postgame. I didn't. No, see the comments,
there was enough other stuff to talk about where it didn't come up, and like frankly, especially a way where it's not like they like whisked him to a medical facility that they have access to. Right? Like we're probably going to need an update Thursday. And look,
do they even have like an X-ray machine in Columbus? Does that?
I was surprised. They had like running water, electricity. They had TV. They had like a lot of the things that you're used to at home.
All right. Good to know.
No, it's actually it's a gorgeous stadium. By the way, it's an absolutely gorgeous stadium. And I mean, look, if the Fire are taking notes, and I know they are, of like what is good around MLS, there's probably a lot of good lessons they can take from that place. So
yeah, absolutely. Leonardo Barroso leaves early. We'll get an update later in the week. Hopefully nothing too serious there, and just an overabundance of caution. Replaced by Dylan Borso, who we will, of course, talk about as this bears on, because Dylan Borso was Dylan Borso on Saturday night. That much I can tell you. Then shortly after
he's
halftime,
Dylan effing Borso, dude.
Yeah, he's Dylan Borso, dude. No, in the 59th minute, Christopher Mueller then leaves with injury. Again, looked like another soft tissue injury. Hopefully, again, nothing major for Chris there, but no updates at the moment. He leaves with Mauricio Pineda at that time. Robin Ludd and Jay Davila come on in relief. And then we fast forward all the way to the 90th +3. Jason Shukaluk enters for Philip Zinkernagel. He should have entered earlier, but had an issue with a necklace or a chain, apparently delayed his entrance. The Fire had a great scoring chance with only 10 men, and it makes you think, if Shukaluk's on the field, do they actually put that one away and win it? But, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, right? It's disappointing, but I guess that's just the way the cookie crumbles, I suppose. And then all in all in this one, Joel Waterman, Philip Zinkernagel, Jonathan Bamba, and Anton Saletros all shown yellow cards throughout this match, kind of from start to finish. A pretty contentious
three
affair.
Crew players. Yeah, I mean, and what was weird is a lot of the same stuff that people were carded for late felt like it was going on throughout the match. The only yellow in the first half was Malt Advinson in the 14th minute, I want to say. And that was, I mean, like, it was a play so bad, like potentially Zink could have drawn 2 yellows on the single play, right?
Yeah.
And I know this is something we'll talk about after, but it did feel like she didn't have control of the match. And I think the way that you know that she didn't have control of the match is that between the two teams, there were 5 yellow cards from the 77th minute or later.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so
look, the she in reference there, Tori Penso, I mean, Tim, you can disagree with, I feel like is one of the better referees in North American soccer.
Oh, she is. She's refereed at Women's World Cup. She has refereed at like high levels throughout the sport on
US
men's
Open Cup
and
final.
Worlds. Yeah. Men's and women's sides, right? Like she's refereed at the top of the game. And she's normally, I mean, I don't think that she typically makes bad calls. And I think that she typically makes most of the right calls. Sometimes she's a confusing referee with her game management. And I know I'm not the only person that felt that, because it was a topic of conversation in the press box. And it's not like we were referring to the same games from Tori Penso that we had been watching, with me covering the Fire and them covering the Crew.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of those weird situations where pregame I was like, oh, great, Tori Penso, like this should be good. And then it wasn't. So unfortunate there, but let's kind of talk through some things here. Some changes to the lineup is where I'll leave it. No Hugo Cuypers pops up on the injury report and then does not even travel with the team to Columbus. Injury did not seem that serious from what we have found out so far, but it's yet to be seen if he'll be featuring this weekend against, is it DC United? It is DC United. Go ahead, Tim.
This is how irrelevant DC United's been. That
oh, come on.
We're covering the team and the game is being played in just a couple of days and we don't even know.
Look, this has been a long week for us, okay?
Yeah, it's soft tissue. Gregg said after the game when I asked that it didn't seem like he was going to be out long term, which is good. I don't think we have more than that. Now, I think it was Agitator. That can be short term or long term, depending on if surgery is required. It sounds like they're thinking it probably isn't, but you never know. So hopefully not. And I think that leads to a topic of conversation of it. If it is long term, what does that mean for the Fire?
Oh, and we're going to talk about if it is long term. Don't you worry, Timmy. We'll get there. Christopher Mueller starts up top in place of Hugo Cuypers, not necessarily like for like in the way they played, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. But the Fire also revert back to their back three. So Marin Haile Selassie moves back into that left wing back role. Leonardo Barroso obviously starts on the right. This was the first time we've seen a full strength back three: Joel Waterman, Jack Elliott, and Mbazeli Mboazi, which was exciting and I think a pretty successful day overall for those guys as we kept another clean sheet. And of course, Mauricio Pineda starting in midfield and the 2-star wingers out on their sides. Tim, the place I wanted to start here is what kind of jumped out to you. I think we were both maybe a little surprised to still see Pineda starting in midfield. Obviously, he didn't go the full 90 this time. But we'll talk about the striker in a minute, but I am curious your thoughts on that midfield pairing, especially with a more defensive setup.
Yeah, I mean, so one, you said a full strength, center, like back three. I think we will typically see the Fire lining up with two center backs and a back four for most of the season. That's the way that Gregg's always or most frequently played. And in the long run, I forget who from American Soccer Analysis got into this earlier today, but you can't have three center backs as your plan A and expect to win every game. It can be a good way to plug some holes temporarily. It can be right in certain situations, like if you go down a man and need to be more defensive. But in general, taking away a player who's going to be getting you on the ball a different way further up the pitch and adding a center back is not going to be a way to be competitive. I think that part of the necessity of doing this was the Fire were starting with a winger that was playing at a wingback role with Martin Haile Selassie, who had a really good game. But I think that with that, and just he's not going to give you the 1v1 defending that like Jonathan Dean would if he had been available. You go to a back three and just play it a little bit safer. So I think that was probably the logic there. Pineda, I mean, I thought he had an okay game. I don't think he covered himself in glory. I don't think that anyone playing in the center of the pitch covered themselves in glory in this one. I mean, it's a 0-0 draw, right? So like that's easy to say. But I think that what it says is that Gregg is still feeling like he's got to be cautious with Jay's development into the player that he can be. He came on, he looked decent when he came on. And it's maybe good that like he was eased back into it in a game where I think if we're being honest, like I don't know that. I mean, look, 0-0, right? Like I don't know that Jay Davila would have changed the score line if he had started and played 90 and looked good for the Fire. I mean, maybe like he can do some stuff, with like progressing the ball and things like that, and so can Maury. Like I'm not trying to take that away from him. It just seems like the gamble paid off, and if that helps just ease the transition for Jay getting to where he needs to be long term, then great. Like gamble paid off in this case.
Yeah, well, and you talked too about wanting to let Leo and Marin both, right? When they were both in the game, they were playing incredibly high up the pitch. Even when Dylan Borso comes on, he's still pretty high into that attacking third. He's not exactly hanging back for a majority of that second half. So it does kind of make sense to keep Maury back there. He's not somebody who's going to willingly join the attack as much. He's the guy who, when the ball's crashing around in the box, he'll kind of come up to the top and maybe try to put one in like we saw early in this game, but he's not necessarily going to be pressing forward, trying to take advantage of spaces. He's more likely to let Jack Elliott do that and have him kind of drop back into that center back space to help in recovery. So it made sense. I think to your point, you're also being careful with Jay, and in a game where you don't necessarily have everything you would want to have around him in the midfield, it does kind of make more sense to let the more experienced, the more, we'll say, calm player, right? The player who keeps his head about him, and not that Jay loses it, but he just, I think, is very easy to get out of whack. Right?
He had a rough outing, and if he's out of the groove, he will not get back in it very easily. And I think that we talked about this before. I don't think we need to get in now because it wasn't an issue in this one. But look, gamble paid off. It's good to have a guy like Maury that you trust as a veteran that can come in and make a positive contribution. The Fire, though, you talked about a high line. They were pretty. I don't want to say pinned back for a lot of the game. They played a good 6-7 meters deeper with where the average position of defensive actions was than what we've seen from the team so far this year. Now, like that's skewed a little bit because of Montreal, but that's also skewed going back because of Montreal. It's also a lot further back than almost 10 meters back from where we saw the team last year. So they were sitting back a little bit more. That I think is just the nature of the personnel choices that were available, having three center backs and all that stuff.
Yeah, on the other side of the coin, and I don't have the heat map. I apologize. I'm not as fancy as Tim with all my charts. No, I kid. But a lot more compact, I think, than we've seen as well. They weren't just sitting low; they were letting the ball come to them, compressing down, really clogging up those kind of central areas that Columbus likes to play through, really making it difficult for anybody to use maybe the speed advantages that they have. I will say that's the benefit of playing Marin Haile Selassie. He's quicker. He's faster than Jonathan Dean. We saw that from Dylan Borso as well. The other one I want to talk about here before I think we talk a little bit more about a couple things that happened.
One note about the compactness, that's now, an entire, like they were compact basically from the red card on in Montreal. Before that, it was in the Fire's end to try to stretch the game, and they were not trying to play that way. And I don't think it was probably going to cost them very much by doing that. But that's a continuation of something that we saw. So it's like good to see multi games of doing this against different opponents that I think it's fair to say, even though the Crew are winless in Montreal no longer are, that they are different levels of teams.
Well, let's talk about let's jump a little bit here. Let's talk about the back three. Let's talk about the defensive performance. Right, everybody we talked to last year, from Lori Lindsay to oh my gosh,
Steve
Ben Wright
Cangelosi.
to Steve Cangelosi. Everybody we spoke with, the refrain was constant. We don't expect to see this from Gregg Berhalter's team next year. We may expect goals, but we're not going to expect goals scored. 60 goals allowed is not going to happen in 2026, and through 3 games, that's holding well. The Fire 2 clean sheets in back-to-back games. It took them 11 matches last year to have 2 clean sheets on the season, and we've got it through the first month.
They allowed more goals during regulation. So, but in the first half of their first game with Berhalter in charge in Columbus last year than they have so far this year. And that includes playing down a man for a substantial portion of one of those 3 games.
Yeah. Hey, look, the personnel is the obvious answer to that question, right? You talk about a guy who, when Joel Waterman is your third choice center back, you've got a pretty good center back room. We can talk about, I think, what's maybe some of the switches that have driven this performance. I do feel like the one guy we haven't talked about through any of these games is Chris Brady, right? A little bit of a rough go against Houston, some poor decision-making with his feet, some less than stellar play between the posts. And I think he's been fantastic since then. Not that he had a ton to do against Montreal, but made some good plays. And he is directing the ball, directing the defense, I think, really well from behind that back 3.
2 clean sheets in a row, made MLS Team of the Week, as a starter. So that says something. The Crew had, I want to say 1.7 XG by Opta's model. I don't have MLS's model in front of me. So he prevented, 1.7 XG from the Crew. So that's a pretty good performance from anybody. And I think it's just good to see that switch around. I thought he also looked more comfortable with the ball at his feet. He was sometimes gesturing at players in front of him of stop, wait, I'm not going to pass it to you yet, because I think the plan really was for somebody to commit and come on to him before he was going to launch the ball to anybody. And I think he just felt more comfortable managing himself with it. It wasn't, he wasn't, elite at it, but it was good. And I think that's a step forward.
Yeah, 100%. And look, of course he's benefiting from better play in front of him, right? Not nearly as many blown assignments as we saw in 2025, at least to this point. But to your point there, Tim, I think that also puts him in a better position to succeed, right? When you can kind of direct from the back and trust that the players are going to make the right decision with you, I do think it makes it easier, right? One of the things we talked about in a big transition from going from Frank Klopas to Gregg Berhalter was everybody kind of understands their roles. They have very strict positional or relational kind of identities and tasks, for lack of a better word. And I think that kind of goes all the way through to the back now, where Chris Brady knows where people are going to be. He understands the assignment, and it allows him to do what he does best at an even higher level, right? Which is shots.
But it's really
shots.
The game over game improvement that I think that we need to focus on. Just because Houston was rough, and it could have been it really felt like, what did he just forget? Did the last year just get deleted in his brain because he was playing like he was at the beginning of 2025, and then coming back, and I think now playing more confidently than we've seen from him with some of that, especially with the ball at his feet. So just, good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit of kind of the front line at large. I want to start with the decision to start Christopher Mueller up top. Right, you and I had a very long conversation about this because we had to talk about it for our 5 things we learned from the match. If you haven't read that already, I would go to menandred97.com. You can read our 5 things we learned in Columbus last week. Some good stuff in there. This is one of the pieces we talked about. Hugo Cuypers obviously missing out. The natural replacement you would expect to be Jason Shukaluk. Not shocking to see he didn't go from jump, right? He did appear on the injury report with a head injury, so we're not exactly sure the extent of that.
That's questionable, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody expected Hugo Cuypers to be out, so nobody was saying, hey, what's Shook's status for Saturday? So not shocking to see Christopher Mueller start in place of Hugo Cuypers. I didn't think it was a poor performance, especially considering it's his first start since 2024. Obviously didn't quite give the Fire what they needed in terms of getting the ball to the back of the net.
I talked to Matt Doyle about this. He wrote about it a little bit too this week, not related to the Fire, but just in general. That if you don't play with a true number 9, it changes the way that you play. And that was certainly the case here, right? He was listed as the center forward, but he was not doing the job that Hugo Cuypers does, and he was not doing the job that I think Jason Shukaluk was asked to do when he came on late, or that he would have been asked to do if he'd had more game time. It really was, he was dropping back, he was playing as a false nine sometimes he was playing almost more like a 10. He was not getting nearly that high up. And it was really Zink and Bamba that were like the twin attackers that were highest up the pitch for the Fire. And that just isn't how they would have been playing with Hugo Cuypers, which, we're talking about 3 of the 10 outfield players, right? All the players behind them, it changed what their assignments were and how that worked because of that change ahead of them. So I think that makes the game a little bit more complicated for everybody, and maybe is a part of why the Fire didn't feel like they were clicking, especially in that first half. Like, honestly, the Fire did not, like, it felt like the Fire's chances of getting a goal were, slim to non-existent after that first half because they were not getting forward enough. They were not getting good chances or really any chances.
For sake of conversation, let's suspend our disbelief a little bit and say, Jason Shukaluk was good to go, right? Questionable with a head injury. Let's say he was okay to participate for all 90 minutes. Like I said, we talked about this a little bit earlier under a different context. I'm curious your thoughts on, a piece of me does feel, in the same way we talked about, hey, should the Fire be playing a different formation that allows their best 11 players to play in their best 11 positions, even with the substitutions, right? Is it better to start a slightly worse fullback if that means Marin gets to play as an actual forward? And I wonder, look, it's hindsight 2020, right? And again, we're making some assumptions about health. Do wonder a little bit, would that result have been better if you allow Jason Shukaluk to start up top and play a little bit more that traditional Hugo Cuypers role? Obviously, it wouldn't be a one-to-one in terms of output, in terms of performance. I don't think anybody's pretending that they are the same level of player, but in terms of his profile and what he can offer, I do wonder if kind of keeping that consistency would have yielded better results. And again, we're making assumptions, but I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah, look, so as a center forward, you don't have defensive responsibilities as much. So it's not like, oh no, like if I mess up once, the game result is really on me and all that. I mean, if you feel like you miss a sitter, it probably weighs on you psychologically too, but I don't think it's quite the same burden to feel. So yeah, I mean, end of the day, if he was good to start, and unless there's really some concerns with his development level and stuff like that, then I would have given him the start, right? Because you don't necessarily have to score from that position to be effective in doing some of the things. Sometimes it's about occupying space. Like, Cuypers had 17 goals during the regular season last year, right? Like, so a majority of the Fire's games were, well, half, I guess, but were played without Cuypers scoring a goal. And they won more of those than they lost. And most of the Fire's offense came when he did not get a goal or an assist. So it's like, it's not like everything runs through the center forward, and that enables everyone else to be doing what they're supposed to be doing better. Now, we could go back and forth about like everyone, like that alone wouldn't have put everyone on the right place. And I think that's when you start moving pieces around. But to me, that's all the more reason of like why, like, just because you have to change one thing doesn't mean you should change more, right? Like, I think you should try to be as consistent as you can.
Look, the one thing I want to call out here is like, I think are in some ways talking about this with the tone of a loss. And it was a draw, right? It was a draw on the road against a really good Eastern Conference opponent. And I think that's an important distinction to make, right?
To me, it was a draw that felt like a win. Like, there's draws that you lose and draws that you win. This felt like a draw that the Fire won because one, they came out.
That's kind of my point, is we're talking about it in the context of like, you lost points. I felt the same way. I did.
And like, look, there are some talking points about, are the Fire getting off to too slow of a start? And they haven't been scoring in open play as much. Like, look, the Robin Lod goal is what it was in Montreal, right? Like, at that point, Montreal's head was out of the game. And I don't want to take the goal away from what Lod did, but at the same time, I don't think that it really was indicative of a 3-0 scoreline the same way it would be. Cuypers' goal a few minutes before that came from the penalty spot. He'd worked to earn that penalty. So again, not fluky, not luck, but like, it's not like it came through open play. And you take those 2 goals away, and then the Fire are now a team that have played 3 games and scored, in open play twice. Once against Montreal, once against Houston. And like, that's how many goals they had in their first half against the Crew in 2025. So like,
but to that end, you're also seeing a more balanced team, right?
It is a more balanced team. And like, I think it has a higher ceiling. And I think the team, and like Greg talked about this after the game, of how it feels like the team had some stuff go really well for them a year ago in Columbus, but some stuff they really hadn't figured out. And now I think that it's a much more mature team. And look, like, I think what we're seeing is the floor getting higher. And the team wasn't close to the ceiling, but I think that last year the team was smashing up against the ceiling with its offense, right? And that was fun to watch, and it is what got the team into the playoffs.
Well, and let's talk about that offense, right? We talked about, we're missing Hugo Cuypers. That's unfortunate. The guy we haven't talked about yet is frankly, the guy I think we all expect a little bit more from. That's Philip Zinkernagel. 2 out of 3 games, kind of disappointing. Not even anonymous necessarily, but disappointing performances from Philip Zinkernagel. Not what we would expect from, quote unquote, the Great Dane. I think I love that.
Have we
name.
said that before?
That's mine, trademark. No, look, and you and I had a long conversation about it in the context of, look, the performance against Houston, he's missing Jonathan Bamba. The performance against Columbus, he's missing Hugo Cuypers. It doesn't appear like Philip Zinkernagel is this guy who will just carry you all the way. He needs his supporting cast around him, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And he had it last year, right? Like every player does. Yeah.
Yeah. But we talked about regression, and I think this is kind of what we were getting to. The concerning thing to me, Tim, is like, it's not like, oh, he's stringing together some nice moments and it's just not there. He to me, it seems like he's pressing. And you saw that frustration come out Saturday in a lot of different moments. It feels like he wants to be better than he is, rightfully so, because he knows he can do it. And it's just not happening right now.
I think that he's frustrated that things are not clicking for him, for sure. I think most of his frustration was at the calls or non-calls or perceived calls or non-calls. And look, I thought that Zink was just frustrated in general, like taking it out on the world and anybody near him at first. But then when I rewatched the game and I looked at what players around him were doing, a lot of players were doing the same thing, and a lot of it was directed at Tori Penn. So again, rightly or wrongly, like I don't want to make this about the ref, because like that wasn't it. And ultimately she did not, I think, drastically affect the game, other than like maybe some of those yellow cards, which whatever at the end. But, I don't think that he was alone with the way he was acting. Now, having said all of that, he also hasn't been playing in the spot that we saw him play, in the role that we saw him play. He was nominally on the right wing in this game, and he was not playing anything close to the role that he was playing on the right wing for the Fire last year. And that's because Mueller was playing behind him. That wasn't a true striker in front, and it wasn't as effective, right? Like it didn't work out as well. Some of that's the Crew's defense being good. Some of that I think is behind him, of neither Pineda nor Silotros were able to get the ball to any of the Fire's like more advanced attackers in dangerous areas, either like in a direct way or like a pass before the pass kind of way. Mm-hmm. And that made it hard to generate offense, and it made Zink look less effective.
Yeah. Look, I will say I want to give him credit for, I think that Montreal game, despite not showing up on the score sheet, I thought he played really well. I thought he looked good in that
was classic
area.
Zink. And that was classic Zink in the Fire playing the role. That's the only game this year that he's played the role with the people around him that we saw from him so much of last year.
So to your point, I think it's less about his position and more about the role, right? Because I think he did it
well.
Pretty
it's the same thing. My point with saying the role is just like you can put names and numbers anywhere on a piece of paper that you want, and like that doesn't really tell you how a team is going to play in and of itself.
Yeah. No, I just say it to say I think it's in there. I think we agree that it's a little more no Cuypers, no Bamba. It makes it difficult because he just has that much more attention on him. The one thing I'll say before we wrap on this.
Well, more than just that, though, it's like also the formation against Houston, the formation here, right? Like
sure.
they weren't effectively playing the formation
the way that the best Hugo Cuypers or Phillips
exactly. And I think the other thing is like having a midfielder behind them. I think that we probably undersold how much of that stuff Gucci was doing. My issue was that he wasn't doing enough on both sides of it consistently. But so far, Pineda and Silotros, I mean, in this one, they were not able to recreate that. Now, Robin Lod on the bench, he is a guy that I think has done that a lot in MLS. And, I get playing 3 center backs, which means you weren't going to also play 3 guys in that section of the midfield. And so so maybe it just wasn't going to happen. And maybe that was the right choice. And look, the Fire got a point on the road from it, but first time since 2021 that the Crew haven't won their home opener. So there's that. But that's something impressive. Now, I mean, obviously it's the new coach. They've had a new coach since then, all that. But I still think it was a good road point. But it was clear that they were missing a creator in the midfield.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that as the season wears on, I'm sure. And, obviously everybody's eyeing Andre Franco's return, right? That's the hope, at least. Yep. And I think from there, that takes me to, look, we've all been waiting for it. I was trying to think of a better place to work this in. I think this is the best place to work it in. Tim, since you gave me Leo against Montreal, I'm going to let you talk man of the match, about the guy who came on in place of Leo, I'm assuming, right? That being the youngster Dylan Borso.
I mean, look, it's one of those things where Gregg's like, we don't give out game balls unless it's a win, and we gave one out to this guy in a draw. I mean, it's got to be that guy, right? It's Dylan Borso. Like, it has to be Dylan Borso that's the man of the match. Like, I don't think anybody could really credibly claim. I mean, look, Brady made it good. It may be the other shout out, right? Like, saving almost 2 goals more than expected, but Borso in that position coming on when you're not expecting to, like, he was not expecting to have his first MLS minutes this weekend.
I don't think he was expecting to travel with the team.
No, he was not. So Gregg said, I was talking to Gregg after the match, and he in the Crew 2's locker room, it very much smelled like a locker room. So he like, Dylan Borso was not training with the team until 2 days before, and he's like, we needed to bring a guy in to train in that spot, and that was it. So then it was we need to bring a guy in to travel with the team. Now Dylan Borso's on a first team deal, so didn't need to use the short-term call-up for that, so that made sense. Mm-hmm. And I think that Borso thought his chances of getting on the pitch were about as good as like mine were at the start of things. And then, he's called in with the injury, which, again, hope that Leo's okay. The team is better with him in it. But man, talk about a game. Like, he started off a little unsure, and I would be nervous. Any human being would be nervous in their first couple of minutes, but that was as bad as it got, and it was a skyrocket up from there.
Man, it was so impressive. To your point, he comes on, he looks very unsure. And at one point, it just kind of seems like something clicks. And you could see Gregg getting frustrated, I think, with how conservative the team was playing. And at one point, I think it just clicked for him. He's like, oh, I need to do something. Like, and dude, I kind of jokingly in the preview, said Leo's going to have Max Arston in hell for 90 minutes. Max Arston was in hell for 70 minutes of this game, but it was Dylan Borso who put him there, man. Like, Max Arston is, for all my criticisms of him in terms of his role in the U.S. men's national team, very, very good MLS player, a guy who probably will end up in Europe in a top 8 league in the next year or two. And Dylan Borso, I think, outplayed him on the night. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say, certainly for what you would expect of him, right? And
early in the second half, the Fire in the first half didn't have a lot of chances going forward. So it felt like a next goal wins kind of night for either team, right? Because if the Fire managed to get one, then that changed the game for them, and blah, 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 blah. And if the Crew got one, it just didn't look like the Fire had any ideas about how to retaliate. So it was a scrum, like a real scrum in the 51st minute. Why are you laughing at the word retaliate?
The Fire did. It's just the way you phrased that was really funny to me. I'm sorry.
I mean, they didn't. They weren't getting things going forward. And
You're
so
correct.
If you go down a goal, that's not going to give you less, right? Like, then the Crew could, if anything, decide, well, we're going to sit back more. Now, I mean, Wilfred Nancy's Crew could not say those words unless they wanted to do 2,000 laps or something like that around the pitch. But we don't know about Rydström's as much. And so it was a possibility, right? So it felt like a next goal wins kind of game. And real scrum in front of the net. Jack Elliott gets the ball, clears it, but not out. It goes back in. Chris Brady makes a save, cannot control the rebound. It goes out. And Borso had timed the run perfectly, was occupying space well, and with a toe on the goal line, deflects the ball out, and Fire recover from there. And that ended the most dangerous sequence that either team had on the night. I mean, the Fire had some individual chances, but it wasn't like a one after the other in a very quick succession kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, best chance on the night for the Fire, probably Dylan Borso going.
No, it was 100% Dylan Borso.
Yeah, and putting his head on the ball.
It was 100% Dylan Borso shot. So So that's great. Like he prevented a goal, right? Which is basically mission accomplished for a guy coming in his first team minutes at fullback, right? Like if he had just done that, it would have been a good performance. And then he goes and does something completely different and gets a shot off that is just, I mean, it's a header. And like the XG on that shot, I think was like 0.7 or 0.8. And that's around what the Fire's entire performance was on the night. Like
it's Patrick Schulte laying all the way out. Otherwise, that's a goal.
He was a very it's one of those things where Dylan Borso managed to basically take one player out of the game in USMNT player out of the game in Max Arfston, and if it hadn't been the performance of another and Patrick Schulte, he would have had his first goal. And man, by the way. I know that the person that does this listens to the podcast some of the time, not all the time. You know who you are. The person that does media training for the Fire, do not media train Dylan Borso anymore. He answered every question appropriately. When the first words out of his mouth was about to include a swear word, and he caught himself and said crap. Like he said, if you told me 24 hours ago that I'd be playing in MLS, I'd tell you were full of crap. I couldn't be more blessed. Like he caught himself. Dude. He checked himself. He's media trained enough. Don't do it anymore, because the real enthusiasm that he has for the game came through in his interview, and you could feel what the moment meant for him. And like, that's what these things are supposed to be about.
I didn't hear the audio, but I read back what you had written about your speaking with him. And the whole time in my head, it's that video of the surfer guy where he's like, I just rode up in the wave. Whoopash. Like that's what I was hearing.
You should listen to the audio, but that's the way that he talked, like with all of it. And like, he's like, I've been, playing soccer 10 years. And I'm like, dude, you're 19 years old. And then he talks about, that was like playing AYSO soccer on grass that was about a foot long. So like, he's really he's on a trajectory up the game.
Shout out Aurora. Is that?
No, AYSO, like the youth soccer organization.
That makes AYSO, way more sense. Chicago. Yeah, I don't know why I thought Aurora. I just wanted to. Shout out the 630, baby.
Either way, like very enthusiastic. He said,
great performance.
He couldn't, talking about the header, he couldn't believe it wasn't a goal either. I mean, it's sort of sad that now this is the second time we're a Fire player that has not had as much of a shot with the first team as I think that maybe they deserved. I'm talking to them about the goal that they should have had but didn't score after last year was Sergio Orahel against Toronto. And I wish it was talking about the goal they did score. But
that would look nice.
It was such a strong performance from Dylan Borso.
100%. No, and the last thing I want to say about this, and we'll wrap. You made a comment when we were talking through some things earlier. Gregg seems to know the right time to give players their opportunities, right? Young players specifically. And I think if you kind of open up the book on this a little bit, it's really interesting. Dylan Borso has been playing as a fullback for Fire too, right? Like that's where he's been playing when he's played down there at the end of 25 and then early in 26. I had to go back through our texts and I found me saying to you watching the opener, didn't have Dylan Borso at right back on my bingo card. And look, maybe that was intentional. Maybe it wasn't. I'd like to think it was, right? And I think also you look at what this team has done when they reached the bottom of the barrel at a very important position in this system, specifically at the fullbacks, right? I mean, we've seen the emergence of Jonathan Dean as a guy who looks like he could be a starter in MLS, right? We've seen Omari Glasgow putting together a pretty impressive 3 or 4 game stretch, right? And we saw Justin Reynolds play against the best team in the league last year, right? And score a goal and hold his own. And
score the goal that sent the Fire to the postseason.
Yeah, to the playoffs, right? Everybody wants to forget it because Guti scored the really cool goal. But yeah, Justin Reynolds scored the goal that sent the Fire to the playoffs against Inter Miami. It just says a lot about this coaching staff and the development specifically of young players who are not Justin Woods, but the other guys aren't natural fullbacks, and kind of what they've been able to do at that position.
Yeah, and like Dylan Borso just started playing fullback late, like September in MLS Next Pro last year.
Yeah.
And the role there, he's not playing wingback, he is playing fullback there. Now, like he's a winger converted into a fullback, so it's not like it's sort of like, all right, well, you kind of have both of those, clubs in your bag, but being able to do them both at a high level and not get caught out and embarrass yourself and, cost your team is not easy to do mentally, and he did it in this one.
Yeah, certainly not for
by the way,
a 19-year-old in his first play.
With the magic of me having time to look it up, I looked it up. That header was only a 0.1 xG, 0.3 on target. So, it is what it is. Mboazi's shot from almost identically and almost the same place on the pitches where it was taken, in stoppage time, was a higher xG.
That was painful, man.
It would have been.
I don't want to criticize him, but like, he had shook right there, man. He just lays that off. It's an easy goal.
Right. And like, look, it's great to see, like, normally my criticism of players is they don't take the shot that's available to them, making an unnecessary pass. Like, that's what, like, Jonathan Bamba has been the issue that's dogged him his whole life. And like, in this case, it wasn't the right call. At the same time, I mean, good on Patrick Schultz to preserve working internet in South Africa, because it would have completely broken the internet there if he had scored that from from that place in that way.
Him missing the shot broke the internet, honestly. Just him having that opportunity, which, hey, look, I will say, that man, what a run. What a run. 96 minutes into a game, you're playing, and he runs the full length of the pitch, carries the ball into the box. Not a perfect result.
He runs like a freight train. Like, when he starts getting on those runs, I don't think that you can just get a toe on a ball and dispossess the ball unless you want to lose your leg.
Oh my God, dude. That's like stepping in front of a freight train or a tractor loader backhoe, whatever TLB stands for.
Yeah, I think that you're correct, but I'm not calling him a hoe.
Okay. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us here around the bonfire. It has been a pleasure to have you. If it wasn't clear, by the way, man of the match, Dylan Borso. Slam dunk for both of us. But thanks for being here. We appreciate you showing up, listening, even when we're a day late. It's great to be here. We enjoy doing it. If you aren't staying tuned to the website, menofred97.com, that's where you can find anything and everything that has to do with Chicago Fire football, all our news, opinions, thoughts, analysis, all that kind of good stuff. You'll find it there. Men of Red 97, anywhere and everywhere that you consume social media content. We'll be there posting things, sharing the things we write, sharing the things we record, and all that good stuff. It's an easy place to find it. And wherever you're listening to this, if you go ahead and subscribe, like, thumbs up, star, whatever it is, if you could do it, it goes a long way in terms of spreading the reach. And then once you're done doing that, if you go over to YouTube, subscribe on YouTube as well. We've got some more video content and live stuff coming out for the rest of the year. We're excited to share it, and that's the best way to stay informed. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. For Tim, for our illustrious producer, Austin, I'm John. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire. Come on, you men of red.